Hey guys, Seti from CMP here, and I want to discuss Goodbye Eri. It's a 200-page one-shot written by Tatsuki Fujimoto, the mangaka of Chainsaw Man and Fire Punch fame. It was released recently by Weekly Shonen Jump and Viz, both in English and Japanese. The link to read the official release for free is in the description of this video. It's not in any way related to Chainsaw Man, and boy is it incredible. But yeah, without further ado, let's get into talking about Fujimoto's latest and potentially greatest work, Sayonara Eri. If you haven't read this one-shot yet, and you like Chainsaw Man, Fire Punch, or any other of Fujimoto's works, I highly recommend you read it now. But just in case you haven't read it yet, the first part of this video is going to be spoiler-free. Goodbye Eri, or in Japanese, Sayonara Eri, is an incredibly artistic manga that I think really speaks to both Fujimoto's talent as a writer and an artist, but also to Fujimoto himself. A down-on-his-luck dude that likes making movies meets a sick girl who likes watching movies, and they work together to make the best movie. At first glance, Yuta and Eri's character story seems like the premise of the blockbuster Shinkai movie. That is, until you remember it's written by Tatsuki Fujimoto. I love how it really subverts the expectations of a typical romance and takes you on such a ride. It really delves into Fujimoto's psyche and, in a sense, how he not only looks at himself, but also his own writing. 2 points in the manga that really hammer home are the blurry line between reality and fiction, and sprinkling in a little bit of fantasy. You can see how this actually lines up with some of Fujimoto's other works like Chainsaw Man and Fire Punch, but also his other one-shots. His most recent one-shot before this one is called Look Back, and in particular this one is interesting because it delves into why the main character started writing and drawing manga. There is no doubt that Fujimoto put himself into that work and every other work that he's ever made, and I don't think Goodbye Eri is any different. I'm sure the line is blurry for Fujimoto as well, where his reality ends, and where the fiction of his manga begins. But of course, there are elements of fantasy in this manga that I've read in all of his other works as well. Spoiler warning, this point forward I will be delving into spoiler territory, so shoo, go read Goodbye Eri if you haven't already. I'll wait. Good. It may only have been 200 pages, but this one-shot was quite a roller coaster. I mean, whew! It had laughs, it had tears, but it was also so deep and artistic. From the small things to the big things, it really felt like everything came full circle. There's obviously the explosion at the end that had me choking on my drink when I read it. It was exactly the sprinkle of fantasy Goodbye Eri needed to end it, and it explained the lingering question of why Yuta exploded at the end of the first movie. It almost seemed crass then, but by the end of the one-shot, the story of Yuta's mom felt like cinematic genius that only Yuta and Eri could see. But the hilarity and genius of that scene aside, the smaller things were what really got. In what seemed like a throwaway line, Yuta mentions to Eri that she makes a peace sign whenever the protagonist of a movie is about to win. So when she makes a peace sign in the hospital, I got teary-eyed. For a moment, I fully expected she would live. Obviously she was going to die. It was made clear by the manga that she would. Yet, for a second I had hope. The story by no means was a romance with a happy ending, and Fujimoto never gave the impression that it would be. But the small detail made that scene work so well. I also really like how the paneling showed that what we were seeing was a film. It was almost like we were seeing clips of Yuta's life, frame by frame. Some panels even had a motion blur on which really sold the film aspect of the manga. We're obviously watching Yuta's movie, but for large portions of the manga, we don't actually see Yuta's face. Presumably that's because he's the one filming what's happening. But it's only when he goes out of his way to show us his reaction or during a particularly emotional scene that we do see him. And even in parts where it feels like there's a raw moment, the paneling is still going in that frame-by-frame layout, which makes it very clear that it's still part of the movie. The fact that everything we're seeing is filtered through not only a camera lens, but also, presumably, Yuta's editing, we don't actually know how much is really true and how much is just an acted-out scene. The aftermath of the one deliberately acted-out scene that we do see is still being filmed. It's almost as if we're watching The Truman Show. This heightened the emotional moments to me, because despite Yuta's willingness to film everything, there is still one thing he couldn't film, one thing that he still doesn't film until the end of the manga. Death. His mother's death was still too much for him to film. Even though our perspective was edited and likely at points staged, Yuta drew the line at filming his mother's death, and it was a line that he was only able to cross after a breakdown and with the support of his father and Eri. And even then, the final scene of the movie that we see isn't Eri dead, it is Eri lying on her deathbed. It's worth pointing out, though, that we never actually saw Eri die. Her death happens off screen in the movie, and when we see her later on, she hasn't aged a single day. Is she really a vampire? Or is this all really part of the original movie, and the older Yuta is just his father acting? Where does the line between the movie Yuta is trying to show us and Yuta's actually life get drawn? We don't know, and I'm not even sure if Fujimoto knows at this point. But if you get hung up on that, I think you're missing the point. How you feel and how you remember the people and events from the past is up to you. What's done is done. The past can't change, but your perspective of it can. And I think that that's the message Fujimoto was really trying to get across. I absolutely loved this one-shot, and I could go talking about it for even longer. And honestly, I kind of want to, but this video is getting a little bit long, so if y'all would like to hear more about it, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.